rather than giving file name dot whatever, they actually return file number 4. And you go to the server side, and you look up in session what the 4th item in the file drop-down list was for that user, and you translate it back to the file name, and you go get the data. Well, if you do that, the attacker can't break out of the list because you have a fixed set of valid values for that particular user. So this is an illustration of that. And we do both random mappings and linear mappings. The random mappings are even better. I strongly recommend you use those because they also make you immune to cross-site request forgery as a side effect. So I encourage you to do that. CSRF, that was the new thing we introduced last year or last update. And what was interesting is this year when we did the risk ranking and the prevalence and all that, it turned out that it ended up in exactly the same spot. So we were lucky or good or something, but that's where it ended up again. So this is still a massively huge problem. So the basic issue with CSRF is we automatically include authentication information on every request. Typically it's your session cookie. So if an attacker can cause you to issue a request to a vulnerable site by giving you an image request or an iframe that your browser automatically retrieves the data for, your cookie will be attached to it. The server will think you deliberately tried to transfer that money from this account to that account, and the transaction will take place. So you need to include something the attacker cannot guess in every state-changing function on your website. So if that request is going to cause data to be updated on the server, something has to be secret in the process. So typically that's a random number that the server generates, includes in the URL, or includes even better in a hidden field, or some other parameter that the server can verify so that we don't have this problem. So this explains the problem, this illustrates the problem, and this talks about the defense of the hidden tokens and stuff. So not only do we have a prevention cheat sheet on this problem, but we also have support for generating these tokens in ESAPI. We also have a project called CSRF Guard, which might protect your entire application from this problem. So I'd encourage you to get familiar with that. A6 is about configuration. I already talked about that earlier on when I introduced it, so I'm going to move on from this one. So my current crusade is to get developers to be aware that they need to update their libraries. That's my kind of current new thing, so I'm going to really be focusing on that for a while. I might even start an OWASP project on that. Crypto storage, nothing really different than last time. This is about using crypto correctly, and the most common problem in this space is people not encrypting stuff that they should. Not that we're breaking nuclear complicated crypto. So we give some information about what you should protect. Example of a problem like credit card going over the network in the clear, or getting logged in a log file and it being accessed. So we give some recommendations on how to avoid crypto problems. URL access, this is typical forced browsing. You go right into the URL, you change the page or the directory, and you see what happens. And this is a very common problem because developers, when they hide a button on the UI, they think that the user can't go there anymore. So we all hopefully know that that's not the case. So make sure that all your pages have access control on them. So whether you put the button there or not, you protect access to that page. Transport layer protection is obviously SSL. So there's lots of reasons to use SSL or some other crypto, VPN, any kind of technology. So we're seeing it's important. It's obviously we're getting down to the bottom of the list, so it's not as prevalent, but we're still seeing a lot of applications not using crypto properly. The main thing I worry about with SSL is a lot of websites don't have SSL all the time. And if you don't, that means your session cookie is getting exposed all the time. Even if you don't think you have anything sensitive being exchanged, the user's session ID is always sensitive because an attacker can steal it trivially, and there we go. So start using SSL all the time. The only real risk is that it affects your performance for the most part, and I don't think that's usually a big issue depending on your site. And this is the the new one, and then I have to stop. So unvalidated redirects and forwards. A lot of websites use redirects. And if you don't validate, well, first off, if you have a parameter that defines the destination of the redirect, and you don't validate that, then the attacker can change the target and you end up on somewhere else. And people use that for phishing and malware sites to get lots of users to a place that they want people to go, and that's very dangerous. And forwards are similar, but where they go inside the application and allow you to bypass access control. So illustrations of both of those, some recommendations, and a summary, and I think that's it. So the main thing I want to talk about is we've got guidance on how to avoid all these problems. We've got the OWASP guides that we've had for years. And something new is the Application Security Verification Standard. If you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you to get familiar with that. It's about how to test your application against a specific checklist of things. And it has levels, 1, 2, 3. So you can do sort of a simple assessment that maybe tools can do at 1. Level 2 is a little bit more deeper, and level 3 is deeper. If any of you guys have to write requirements, we would strongly encourage you to use ASVS because it's a great list of security requirements. If I have to build an application, what do I do first? Well, there's a whole list of things that you should have to do. And one of the efforts we have in play right now is that we're trying to organize all the guides around ASVS. So the developer guide, testing guide, code review guide would all focus on, be organized in the same way for consistency. And then there's the ESAPI project that I've mentioned before, and I have listed here. So again, if you're not familiar with the ESAPI project, I strongly encourage you to get familiar with it. There are hugely useful components in there. Some of them are harder to use, so grab the easy stuff. Just use the validators. Just use logging. Just use the encoders first. And once those start to work, then maybe grow to use more things, or implement your own equivalents if you don't like what's in ESAPI. Anyway, I'm way out of time, so I do want to acknowledge there's 4 companies that contributed data this time. My company, MITRE, SoftTech, and White Hat. So that's better, and hopefully next time we'll have 10 sets of contributors to the data, and that'll help with our prevalence statistics. And we had a lot of reviewers of the top 10. This is the first time we published it and gave a comment period. And that worked out really well because we got a lot of really good feedback and we had an improved document that we published. And that's it. I know I'm way out of time, but I'm also the last speaker, so maybe I can entertain a couple questions and then we'll call it a day. So, any questions? Yep. Yes, because we want to make that one issue. Oh, I'm sorry, the question. Why is cross-site scripting not included in injection? Which is a great question. We get asked that all the time. The reason it's not is because you want to lend more visibility to cross-site scripting as an issue. It absolutely is an injection issue, no question. It's how the main difference, though, it's a client-side injection problem, not a server-side injection problem. Now, the techniques for dealing with those are very similar, yes, but it's so incredibly prevalent that it deserves extra sunshine as a designated item in the top 10. But I've had a lot of people say, can't you merge these together so you can make room for my favorite thing that's not in your list? And we're like, well, we could, but your favorite thing isn't quite as big of a risk as cross-site scripting is, so sorry, no. And we did something similar with the 2 data access control functions. We have URLs and we have data layer access control. So we have access control twice in the top 10 for the same reason, because we want to put sunshine on both of those issues because we're obviously not doing it right. So great question. Maybe one more and we'll call it? Yeah. Go ahead.
If I understand that correctly, you count SSL version 2 and weak ciphers to A9, insufficient transport layer protection.
Okay.
Which seems on the first glance correct to me. However, on the second glance, it's a configuration issue on most servers.
Well, again, it's about sunshine, right? So we want a lot of sunshine on not using SSL, right? I mean, first off, the main issue is just not using SSL all the time. That's the primary issue. And then once they start using it, then getting it configured right. So of course, we got to say something else other than A9, use SSL all the time, done, right? Be kind of a short, we've got a lot of room on the page to say something else. So we do talk about configuration of SSL on that one page. But yes, it could be a configuration issue too. But that's why it's there. It's trying to do a taxonomy where there's no overlap between 10 different things is nuclear impossible. So I'm not saying there's no overlap between the top 10 items, because there is. All right. Well, thank you, guys.